was almost to the point where I was going to end up being hospitalized. By the time I was getting paid, I was about $30,000 in the hole. Guys, I still owed my friend current rent for the apartment I no longer lived in. Hello and welcome to the first episode of Buying My Freedom. My name is Steven, I'm 28 years old, and I'm from the middle of nowhere, USA. And I'd like to tell you a little story. I call this story, appropriately, the fuck around and find out years. So, in the spring of 2014, I was 15 years old, and my parents told me that I needed to get a job. They were tired of me lounging about the house doing nothing. They wanted me to be productive. They wanted me to start earning my own income. Because, gosh darn it, I was only a few years away from being an adult. So I needed to start acting like an adult and start earning income. They needed to teach me about money, and my family encouraged me to save as much money as I possibly could. They told me that I should be saving about half my paycheck while I had no bills. So that's what I did. I saved 50% of my income, and I became obsessed with personal finance and entrepreneurship. As a result of that, I ended up reading a lot of books, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is about real estate investing. Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace, and his other works, which is all about not falling into traps, which I did eventually later fall into. The Everything Store, which is about Jeff Bezos and his rise with Amazon. And The Millionaire Next Door, which is all about people having good financial habits so that in retirement they became millionaires and had financial security for the rest of their lives. All of these books inspired my attitudes towards money. One of my favorite quotes in the world is actually from Dave Ramsey, although I disagree with him about a lot now these days. It's live like no one else, so later you can live like no one else. I really like that quote, but I also like another variant of it, which is live like no one else, so later you can live and give like no one else. I would really, really like to be the guy who doesn't have to worry about what's in his bank account. That's the kind of person I want to be. I want to be able to help people who are down on their luck. No questions asked. All this stuff formed my flawed mental foundation, and some parts of this foundation were less shaky than others. Pillar 1, financial security is everything. Pillar 2, all debt is bad. Pillar 3, if I want to be rich, I need to work harder than everyone else all the time. Pillar 4, nobody is going to help you achieve, you must be self-made. All of these have been modified a bit. As a result of me thinking all debt was bad, I refused to get a credit card. I didn't need credit to get through the world. So I saved every penny I could, because I was convinced that if I wanted to do something like buy a house, I needed to do it all in cash, period. So this is my employment timeline. From 2014 to 2016, I had my first food service job. I graduated from school in the summer of 2016, and I got my second food service job. I worked at my second food service job from 2016 to 2018. That job was relentless. I worked really, really, really hard, got a promotion, and ended up working 6 days a week for 16 hours a day. It was completely unsustainable, and I burned out by the fall of 2018. I quit that job in the fall of 2018 and coasted on my savings because I worked all kinds of overtime. And I remember the first 2 weeks, all I did was sleep. And then after that, I did a lot of self-care. The winter of 2018, I became a security guard. And then in 2019, I got myself into a bit of a pickle. I couldn't get a new apartment because I had no credit history. So I had to move back in with my parents. And one of the conditions of that was, Steven, you need to get a credit card and start building the credit history. Obviously, 2019 to 2020 was also the time that COVID-19 was becoming a thing and really ramping up. When COVID became very real, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who lived in Colorado that I wanted to be closer to. Basically, in one conversation, I made the decision that I was going to get a second job, save $10,000, and move to Colorado to start a new life because I was unhappy where I was. In the summer of 2021, I succeeded. I moved to Colorado in July of 2021. I was really proud, and I tried a few experimental jobs, and I ended up landing back in food service. I worked in food service for another 3 years, and that was what really solidified that I never, ever, ever wanted to work in food service ever again. In 2024, I was job hunting. I got a message from a temp agency offering me a job at a big corporation with a big pay bump and 3 weeks of paid training so I could work 4 days a week with guaranteed overtime because they were 12-hour shifts. Everything seemed like it was on the up and up. This was a no-brainer career move. I had to do this, so I did. And that's when everything went wrong. So, the new job turned out to be a really bad fit for me. In my first week, I found out that the environment that I had to work in did not work for my body. I ended up getting physically ill because of the environment I was in. Also, in that first full week of work, I got scammed. Oh boy, did I get scammed, and I fell for a hook, line, and sinker. So, with the stress of getting scammed and the job being a bad fit, I decided to quit the job, and I called up the temp agency, and I said, hey, is there any other employment that you could hook me up with? And the temp agency basically ghosted me and dropped the ball. So I started pounding pavement, and I had no luck job hunting. I was giving my physical resume to people. I was applying for stuff online. It was bad. Nobody was calling me back. Also, because the income was inconsistent, my job transition didn't go well. I ended up owing my roommate back rent. I ended up depleting the brokerage account that I had created in 2020 with the stimulus checks. I had attempted to use Instacart to get me by in the meantime when I was trying to hunt for jobs and having no luck, and I think I made like $125 in a week, and that was about it. And I spent a lot of time in my car waiting for orders. Eventually I broke down and I realized my situation seemed pretty hopeless. And I called my parents and asked them to bring me back to the middle of nowhere because I'd screwed up. You would think that coming back home would be the fix for everything, and it kind of was, but it wasn't instant. So, I got back. By this point, I hadn't been eating well for multiple weeks. I was so stressed that I was dry heaving. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I felt unsafe in the situation I was in. I'd never felt so insecure before in my life. And when I got back, the job hunt was fruitless. Everything was low-paying slop, and nobody was calling me back. I got really, really, really sick from the stress. And I had a few false leads, too. Eventually, I did get a call back for a job that was similar to the one that didn't work out for me, but was a better work environment for my needs. I applied for it, I interviewed for it, I did a factory tour, and then I was told it would be at least 3 weeks before I would know anything. I was like, alright, well, I've got my application in, I've interviewed for it, but I need to keep searching for work. And the night of the interview, when I got home from it, I became physically sicker than I've ever been in my life. I was throwing up constantly, I could not keep food down, I could barely keep water down, I was sleeping all the time, I had like really horrible pain in my feet, I could barely stand, I was super weak. It was scary. It was almost to the point where I was going to end up being hospitalized. This wasn't made any better by the fact that I had no income and I had to ask my parents to float my minimum payments for me. Eventually, I did end up getting a job that job is fantastic. It's the job I have now. I'm very, very thankful for it. But shortly after starting this job, my car took a crap. I had to do a $1,200 repair before I'd even gotten my first paycheck. So my parents floated that too. By the time I was getting paid, I was about $30,000 in the hole between the minimum payments I had borrowed, the back rent I owed my roommate, and the other money I had borrowed for other things. And I also still owed my friend... Yeah, I still owed my friend current rent for the apartment I no longer lived in. At best, I was keeping 30 to 40% of my paycheck. It was really, really bad. Here's the timeline from when I got employed to present. November of 2024, I finally secured employment. January of 2025, I had secured a second job, and I started working 7 days a week. By August of 2025, I had finished paying all my current rent. The lease had expired in May. I finished paying my parents back and my roommate. It was fantastic. It was one of the best feelings ever. So much weight off my shoulders. Also in August of 2025, because I'd been working 7 days a week for months on end, I cut my hours down so that I could prioritize myself a little bit. And I also started prioritizing investing over some other things in order to build my portfolio for my master plan. In November of 2025, I continued my 7-day work week. In January of 2026, I began working on the final details for the plan to repay my debt. In February of 2026, I finally had some paid time off, and I used that to go visit my friend in Colorado for a week. Also, towards the end of February, I ended up finalizing my master plan to drag myself from the bottom of the barrel to the top of my potential. And that's how I came up with the idea for this channel. Now, finally, it's March of 2026 and my plan can begin. It already has begun. So here's the game plan, March to December of 2026. I need to establish a couple details before we get started here. I use M1 Finance for investing. M1 Finance offers margin loans and personal loans through the margin loan program. And the maximum amount of money you can borrow total is about 50% of your portfolio value. It's a very, very nice, streamlined system that you can do through your phone. I've invested about $13,000 in my portfolio, and my portfolio value is roughly about $12,500. That establishes the field for how this debt pay down is going to work. So, step one is debt conversion. All right, I have 4 major sources of debt obligations, and each of those sources hovers around an interest rate of about 30%. The interest rate on personal loans currently through M1 Finance, using my portfolio as collateral, is 5.65%. The plan is to convert my high interest debt to low interest debt. Step 2, the debt pay down. At the end of the month, every month, I will borrow a predetermined lump sum to target my debts. The personal loan will be paid with extra money left over from my paycheck. That usually averages somewhere between $400 and $700 a week. The debt will also be paid with the dividends from my stock portfolio. I only buy dividend-paying stocks. If the stock does not pay me on a regular basis, I do not buy it. I'm not in for growth. I'm in for dividends plus growth. Step number 3, buy assets. So, number 3 is going to be achieved at the same time as number 2. Every time I pay a lump sum of debt, I will also borrow a predetermined amount to buy more assets using available margin on M1 Finance. Buying these assets will not only increase the available capital to be loaned, but it'll also increase my dividend payouts. This will lower my risk by increasing the available money, increasing the gap for when I could get margin called, and it also helps secure it by increasing my cash flow through dividend raises. Every time I buy more assets, I make more money. Step number 4, clear the margin. So after the last debt obligation is cleared and converted, the goal is pretty simple. I'm going to pay down my remaining margin loan. I'm going to buy more assets until I hit my goal portfolio value at the end of the year. The goal is to get my portfolio value to $30,000 by the end of 2026. The margin utilization, ideally, should be $1,000 or less. When this is complete, then I can move on to the next phase. So, depending on how things go, it may end up overlapping into January of 2027, and that's fine, but I want to aim high here, and I want to get this done by the end of December. Now we're getting to the infamous debt obligations. How much debt do I have left to pay? I have pay over time loans with an app called F.I.R.E, and I owe $6,000 to F.I.R.E. I have an Amazon credit card, which I owe $3,000 on. I have a Chase credit card, which I had gotten for airline miles and used for a whole bunch of different stuff, and I owe $6,000 on that. And I have a Capital One credit card that currently is where I do all my spending. I have a limit of about $3,500. The rolling debt is about $3,000 on that. So that brings our grand total to negative $18,000. That's a lot of money, and that's pretty darn bad. But you know what? Things seemed very hopeless, and for a while they really were hopeless. I felt just like Sisyphus here, rolling that boulder with no hope in sight. The task may feel impossible, but I know that I'm going to find a way, and I'm going to win. And I'm going to tell you more about how I'm going to win in next week's episode. Next week, we're going to go over more about how this debt paydown works, and I'm going to tell you all about my portfolio. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope you hit like and subscribe, and that we can go on this journey together. Thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.